Welcome to today's edition of the J&B Talk F1 podcast. It's 30th of September, the aftermath of the Japanese Grand Prix. It wasn't the most memorable occasion, with Lewis Hamilton streaking to victory and Nico Rosberg making it a 1-2 for Mercedes, but there are a few interesting points which did come in the fallout from that race, which we'll be discussing. Not least, there was no airtime for Mercedes. A lot of theories into why this might be going on in relation to the engine supply tie-up with Red Bull. Segueing into that with Red Bull, a lot of rumours going around what their future will be, whether they're going to continue or pull out unless their demands are met. Ron Dennis, the Mercurial Ron, he's a confirmation, as it were, post-Suzuka, that the status quo lineup will remain in place. Is this to be taken on face value, or is he just calling a bluff, as he's prone to do from time to time? Also, other driver announcements, and we've got Renault. There's now confirmation that they're going to be taking a majority stake in the Enstone operation. Obviously the operation which they did run for many years, going back into the 2000s. Romain Grosjean, he's moved on to Haas. That's a big point. He's been confirmed now. And Nostalgia Straight. Well, look at 3 years ago to this week, the call by Lewis Hamilton, which really shook everyone when he announced that he was leaving the team he had grown up with in McLaren, moving to Mercedes. No one could have foreseen the utter dominance which he has enjoyed with the team in the subsequent seasons. Off the top anyway, I'm Bayden Westerweller, and I must mention it's good to be back, having been lost in translation on Saturday evening. And without further ado, Jawad Yaqub, you took the honours there and handled it all by yourself. A good job there. I'm sorry I couldn't have been there, but yeah, I'm happy to be back. And how are we today?
Yeah, very well. It's good to be back as a pair, of course. And as I said on Saturday, due to some technical difficulties, we were unable to connect with Bayden on that occasion. But anyway, this is the big one, the Wednesday, as always. And yeah, the Japanese Grand Prix, as you said, it was a pretty underwhelming race, to be honest. It promised so much with Nico Rosberg on pole position, having the better of his teammate for most of the weekend. But during the race, Hamilton just kicked it into a whole new gear and was able to wipe the floor with Rosberg. Toto Wolff said after the race that he was a bit down on power after the start. The initial getaway was quite even between the two, but coming out of turn one, Hamilton just had the advantage, and we saw that Rosberg just conceded so many positions. I think he was as low as 4th or 5th at that time. So Toto Wolff said that that's as a result of a hotter power unit. Don't know what to take away from that, but yeah, again, another non-event for Rosberg, as it were.
Yeah, well, there was also a lot of speculation that Rosberg had been suffering from some sort of headache or upset stomach in the lead up to that race, and of course, it transpired that he did make that poor getaway as he did at Belgium, and it's costing him big time. He's always on the back foot, and really, it's just not going to cut it for him. One more race win for Hamilton at this point, and you can pretty much say he's out of the equation, even as it is. He's 48 points down
48
again?
48 points, 48 points. And there's 125 points in total left on the board for this season with 5 races to go. It's not like last season where we had double points at the final race. So not a lot of points. There is, I guess you could say there is a lot of points available, but it's up to, Rosberg to be at the receiving end of those big points, and Hamilton perhaps to have a few misfortunes.
You'd almost have to have this notion that Vettel is a more realistic proposition of taking the title than Rosberg. The German, or Rosberg, as they're both German, just doesn't inspire any confidence at this point in the season, whether the distraction of becoming a father is weighing on his mind. But Sebastian Vettel, as we did allude to in the previous edition when both of us were in company, Vettel is pretty much matched Hamilton since the midway point of the season, and who knows, if he has a really good weekend soon enough, he could have a late charge for that title.
Yeah, well, they say now that Ferrari's power unit is on par with the Mercedes power unit. Both engines and whatever have the same output and same efficiency, but it's just down to the cars now in terms of aerodynamics, the chassis, and everything. So as we saw, on the weekend, Ferrari weren't on the pace that they showed in Singapore. Perhaps, they prepared their car for Singapore a bit better than Mercedes had. That was the conjecture. But yeah, heading into the final few races, these are races that last season Mercedes, except for Mexico, of course, which we don't know what will happen there. But they were events that Mercedes dominated at, so we'll see. But again, for Lewis Hamilton, he clinched his 41st career victory as well at Suzuka. And iconically, Suzuka is a circuit that his idol Ayrton Senna, who also achieved 41 victories in his career, actually clinched all three of his titles at as well, 88, 89, and then 91.
Yes, well, he didn't have to wait too long.
Sorry, 88, 80, 90, and 91, not 89. He almost did in 89.
The one that got away.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Hamilton, a week later than he would have hoped for when he, if he does believe in fate and circumstance there, 161 starts. That's what he brought up at Singapore, and he ultimately had an off weekend there, but he's now alongside the great Brazilian and only one victory short once again of Sebastian Vettel. Alain Prost's 51 victories now well and truly
the next target,
in sight. Sometime in the next 12 months, either of those are going to be breaking that mantle to be second on the all-time list behind Michael Schumacher, who might take a few more years for them to get there, but they're well and truly on that path.
Well, if Ferrari certainly are on par with Mercedes come the start of next season, then it's possible we'll see those two going, head to head to try and get to that number that the Frenchman set. So it'll be interesting to see. But let's talk more about the race itself. And we saw a bit of carnage at the start, not too much, but a slow start for Felipe Massa. Saw him have contact with Daniel Ricciardo, who started pretty well, it seems. But the problem with Ricciardo is he was boxed between Massa and Raikkonen and didn't really have anywhere to go. So both drivers ended up getting punctures, and as a result, their races were ruined.
Yeah, well, for Ricciardo, he'd made really like he was a rabbit in the headlights making that dash. He probably would have made up 2 or 3 positions, but he just clipped that really the wing made contact with his left rear, and that was all she said. And from there, he was on the back foot. Disappointing for him. He had shown some consistent pace on that Saturday, but it came to nothing, especially after what happened at Singapore when he was really in with a shout of victory there, and continues all the conjecture as well with Massa too. Of course, he's prone to have his little opinion that he's the one in the right every time there's a collision. So it was interesting to see.
Did he say anything after this one?
On this occasion, interestingly, there wasn't much for him to add. So perhaps he acknowledged that he might have been in the wrong there.
Or maybe, he agreed that no one was in the wrong, and this time it was a racing incident. But only a week ago we saw Massa putting the blame squarely on Hülkenberg, and I think Hülkenberg, didn't he send a text message to Felipe Massa apologizing for the incident? So that's something we don't hear about. We don't hear about a lot these days. But yeah, as a result, both drivers were unable to finish in the points because they were so far back. But he at a circuit that Williams could have scored even more points at. But
I just can't get it right, Williams. Every time they seem to have a strategy in place, it goes on the opposite direction. And you have to wonder if they're this competitive now and they can't get a victory when they did back in 2012. When is that breakthrough going to come?
Yeah, indeed, exactly. As you were saying, a bit aggressive on the strategy as well, and they tried this with Valtteri Bottas. He was third, I think, by the time that Rosberg dropped a few places. He started third, so he was up there anyway, and the team decided to pit Bottas early in comparison to the other front runners, but this ended up backfiring and allowed Rosberg and Vettel to get position, so they were running second and third, and then even fourth was stripped from Bottas by his countryman Kimi Raikkonen, as Raikkonen got the undercut on him in the second stop. So yeah, fifth for Bottas in the end, and that was the only points that Williams scored as well over the weekend, with Massa being knocked out over there.
Yeah, lost. You could almost say 100 points have gone begging since that Silverstone weekend, and must be just frustrating times for them. And Red Bull, they're not going to catch them in that constructors standings, but they just haven't made the most of their opportunities there. Must be frustrating as well when you see Bottas. He's now stuck with well, not stuck, but he's not going to be going to Ferrari next season, and you'll be hoping that there will be some kind of improvements
Yeah,
made
you'd
for
hope that
2016.
they have a more competitive package come 2016, especially considering you'll have Ferrari up there on par with Mercedes as well, which is something everyone's looking forward to. Who knows about the other teams as well? So Williams really need to be up there, and perhaps doing what they can to take away points from Ferrari if they want to keep that de facto relationship with Mercedes-Benz. But yeah, Rosberg as well finished second in the end despite that poor getaway. Well, it wasn't a poor start. It was just what happened as a after that as a result, and Vettel pressured him all the way to the end, and in the end the gap was only 1.8 seconds. So there you go. What you were saying before, Bayden, about Vettel being a bit more competitive, bit more racy at the moment than Rosberg. It's clearly showing on track. Whilst Rosberg does have theoretically the best car on the grid, Vettel is really just chewing away at the points.
Yeah, for Vettel, he's starting to evoke some of those the memories which became so frequent in the 2011 and 2013 campaigns, really, when he was quite peerless. Obviously, he can't quite do a bit more with that package, but what he has done already, it's a lot more than anyone could have foreseen at the start of the season. And really, if he keeps his nose clean, he could pip Rosberg to that P2 in the standings, and that would be quite something, and it'd reflect quite poorly on Rosberg himself.
Yeah,
there,
very much so. Considering where he was last season, Rosberg, he was very much in the thick of the championship. But this season, he's only seemed that he's been there or thereabouts, not right in there. But anyway, moving it on, Sergio Perez had a first corner touch with Carlos Sainz, so it meant he was taken out of the points as well. He had to run behind, and Nico Hulkenberg ended up running a race on his own to finish in the points, which was a good result for him considering the last few races.
Oh, good haul. P6 in the end. It's a healthy swag of points. So they've really come on Force India since that.
The B-Spec car.
Yeah, those vaunted upgrades. They were made to wait for them, both drivers there, and they're going to be hopefully enjoying the fruits of that if they can continue into next season now that both are confirmed to return.
Exactly, consistency through to next season. And again, Toro Rosso raced pretty hard as well. They were probably the most interesting duo to watch on track. It's funny, we haven't seen much action up the front, but in that midfield or whatever, we're seeing a lot of competitive racing going on, and none other than Max Verstappen, who he got penalised after qualifying and started P18 and fought his way back up to finish ahead of his teammates. So
as we saw at Singapore, it's no deterrent where he does line up, or indeed where he does take his start from, whether it will be at the back of the grid or in pit lane. He inevitably seems to be somewhere lurking around, if not a point, then several. And really, it's a sign if he gets a competitive car. Not that Toro Rosso isn't handy, but
if it had a better engine, say, the Toro Rosso could be further up there for sure.
Yeah, if you had the Ferrari engine, as Toro Rosso enjoyed for many seasons, and perhaps even still 2016, it could happen. Then every chance he could be a regular contender, top six even.
Exactly, and the thing about the Toro Rossos during that race was that their gain was Fernando Alonso's pain. As on many occasions we saw the Toro Rossos just murdering the McLaren Hondas when it came to just down the straight, back on the back straight towards 130R and into the chicane, and a difficult race. I mean, words can't describe how difficult it was for McLaren Honda, considering this is Honda's home circuit. You've got all the executives, you've got all the fans as well coming out there. And in the end, what happened was we had a audibly frustrated Fernando Alonso claiming that this is like a GP2 engine and it was embarrassing. And, if you were the boss of Honda at your home race, would you be wanting to hear these sort of things from your drivers?
Well, Johnny Herbert in the post-race was quite fervent in his belief that Alonso, if it wasn't a driver of his caliber, he'd be telling him to grab his gear and never be seen again. He was quite strong about it, but on the same level, you can understand the Spaniard. He's had an extremely trying season, of course, that infamous commencement to his renewed collaboration there at the pre-season test, and conspiracies there. Make of it what you will, but few and far between has been any kind of breakthroughs this season, save really that Hungarian weekend, a race of high attrition there. And the same for Button, who was pretty similar in his sentiments in the latter stages of that race. And despite what we'll touch on later with Ron Dennis, that this notion that both drivers are going to be staying put, it looks far from that the way things are going. And if there is no light at the end of the tunnel before the end of this campaign, then wouldn't be surprising at all to see one, if not both of them, out of that operation.
Yeah, certainly both giving off the signs that they're unhappy and perhaps, even want to just get out of it. They probably expected to have some pain this season, but to the extent of pain that they have had, probably not that much. And we'll talk more about it, of course, when we discuss Rod. But yeah, we saw Alan Prost famously sacked from Ferrari after criticising the car.
Being a truck, as he called it.
Yeah, being a truck. And, Alonso's got away with such thing. He's criticised it pretty much like Prost did. And, he, as Herbert said, that if he was a driver of lesser caliber, then perhaps he'd be shown the door. But, yeah, rocky future perhaps for both of those McLaren drivers. And Jenson Button, he couldn't even put up a fight when he came into contest with any drivers except for the Manners. They were the only cars that they beat again. And just when is it going to end? Are we going to see next season these guys come back and show a genuine improvement? Are they going to be back up there, or are we going to see more of this?
Well, if Manor ends up taking up that Mercedes deal, which Niki Lauda is good as confirmed in the post-race there, and Haas, of course, with their almost a factory collaboration with Ferrari there, it wouldn't be a surprise to see them immediately troubling the midfield, or even stronger. Then McLaren, there's a good chance they'll be at the rear, anchored there, unless that Honda and the chassis can bond and make a logical step. It's just very dark times for Woking at the moment. Very far cry from even remember the mid-season when Arisan was very
optimistic.
Yeah, very optimistic. You can say that. He was proclaiming podiums and even a chance of a victory, and really being best of the rest behind Mercedes. And if anything, they've gone backwards since that Belgian weekend, and they're within their rights, Alonso and Button, now to be demonstrating some of this anger, which has obviously been festering for the portion of the campaign today.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention it later, but now that you've talked about it, I mention it now. A friend of mine who doesn't watch F1 exactly asked me over the weekend, why are two big names such as Button and Alonso at the back, and it was difficult to explain, without getting all technical jargon out and what have you, that it's because of the engine as well, and they came in thinking it would be, it's like a new project or whatever. So yeah, even people just who are laymen to F1 and know a few names like Button, Alonso, Hamilton, or Vettel, even they're sort of questioning as to why two names of that caliber are at the back of the grid. But what can we say? It was a tough weekend financially for Lotus.
We saw them on the Friday or the Thursday locked out of their hospitality units.
The hospitality units were empty. There was nothing. Bernie Eccleston had to feed them in the Paddock Club. He was generous enough to open the doors of the Paddock Club. And
who would have known Bernie could be so generous?
Yeah,
they stump up a couple of grand just to feed them out of his very shallow pockets.
Yeah, exactly. And they were seen sitting outside of sitting outside of the garage on like Eskies or whatever, and that's how they were able to, eat or whatever. But yeah, both cars scored points, so a good result for them, obviously, in these difficult times. We know now that Grosjean will not be staying next season. He'll be moving to Haas. We'll discuss that a bit later. But yeah, the more points that they get, I guess, the more prize money it'll accumulate for next year.
Well, it was fortuitous timing, not that the outcome was known at the time. Obviously, Renault's going to come to that rescue, as it was revealed on the Monday, immediately prior to that HMRC meeting, which has now been adjourned to post-season. But for Renault, obviously, it came at a vital time, and their future does look secure now, and they can get on, hopefully, the rest of the campaign without further ado.
Exactly. And Alexander Rossi, again, beating his teammate Will Stevens. But it has to be said, it wasn't a easy race for Stevens. He had that spin at 130R, which is quite spectacular. A semi-spin it was. He was able to recover it. And then, of course, a drive-through penalty for pit lane speeding. So, yeah, Rossi got the better of his teammate again. And considering, both guys are fighting for seats at this team, or indeed probably Haas for Rossi even, it's good for him to get the two good results over his teammate.
We have to look back. The unfortunate Roberto Marie, who is, of course, going to come back into that seat for two of the remaining events.
Yeah, the next event at Russia, he'll be back. Yeah.
He had been showing his best foot forward essentially against Stevens after a bit of a slow start there. Of course, he's a lot taller, Marie, and he was unfortunately turfed due to pretty understandable financial circumstances. But there's a chance next season that Stevens will be the odd one out. Maybe Marie will come back, and we'll see Rossi in a full-time drive, if not for this notion that Rio Haryanto might be the other candidate.
Yeah,
there.
he's been mentioned as well with his Indonesian funding as well, and he's won a couple of races at GP2 this year, so he does come with credentials. But yeah, for Rossi, good result, getting some good track time as well, whilst he will return to GP2 in a fortnight's time at Russia for that championship, even though it seems like Stoffel Van Dorn's already wrapped it up. But yeah, good for Rossi. He's getting a lot of mileage under his belt in both categories, so it's a good notion to see. And yeah, we'll be back next week previewing the Russian Grand Prix. So for the Japanese Grand Prix, I guess that's pretty much it, except we'll talk now about the fact that the leading team, Mercedes AMG, didn't get any TV time during the race.
Yeah, a lot of really theory out there that this ties in directly to their lack of agreements with Red Bull to supply them with their own power units. Of course, they had this fear that a half-decent Red Bull chassis, if Adrian Newey is to get a bit more hands-on once more, then they'll be troubling them more often than not. And then, of course, Ferrari as well. They're in a similar state where they're only offering these watered-down 2015 PUs, B-spec as they're being described. And now Mercedes appear to have paid the price on Sunday at the behest of Bernie, who was pretty desperate to see his good friend Didi Manischitz stick around with both of his operations there. And it must be said, yeah, they were conspicuously absent. We only saw them at the start and really at the end, maybe at pit stops. And afterwards, pretty much they I don't know, Lauda and Wolf, obviously they're keeping their cards close to their chest.
Yeah, they deny that it has anything to do with the Red Bull situation, but
they'll be well aware.
We haven't really heard too much about it, so it'll be interesting if we do hear more. But yeah, that segues into the latest on Red Bull Racing, and things are looking pretty dire, it must be said. Earlier on in the year when we heard about Matischitz's threats to quit, back during the first set of flyaway races, we were just calling his bluff. We thought he wouldn't really go with it, but what Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, is saying now is the situation is quite critical at the moment, and if they have no engine, it means that they're not going to be able to get the 2016 car ready on time. And considering the Australian Grand Prix as well is now being it hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's likely that it may be taken back from the April 3 date to March 20. So they'll lose a chunk of time, if that ends up happening. So really, Red Bull are in a bit of a big pickle here, it seems, on whether they're going to be around next season or not.
You've been saying quite vocally off the air that I think we all share the sentiment, or many of us, that they've made their own bed here. They haven't planned very well for that future. They've been thinking in the now, and it's come back to bite them really harshly. And they burn all the bridges, it seems, with those who they haven't even got an official relationship with. It seems as though if they aren't given what they want and appeased, then they don't waste any time shooting their mouth off. And consequently, we have this predicament where it's almost 50-50 proposition whether they do bow out.
Yeah, and the question that I wanted to ask as well was that should Red Bull have perhaps before having that spectacular split with Renault have put a deal in place, maybe not put pen to paper, but at least have had some concrete discussions and put a deal in place. At least they would have some kind of backup, because what's happened, is they've split with Renault and have had no deal in place, and now they're just going around knocking on everyone's doors and asking for engines, and they want them on their terms, not the constructors' terms. A reason that Ferrari, perhaps, this might be it does sound feasible, of course, but yeah, Ferrari perhaps may not have 4 2016 engines ready in time for Red Bull, and indeed Toro Rosso by the first race or by pre-season testing. So perhaps that's a reason why they're not offering 2016 spec engines. And then of course there's that whole performance issue. Or we don't want Red Bull to be quicker than the works team. So it's not just a matter of Ferrari not wanting Red Bull to be quicker. The other reason, indeed, is perhaps it's difficult to get those engines ready on time. And Horner himself saying that, our 2016 car is already in jeopardy because we haven't been able to start development with whatever engine we're going to have next season. So
the really most outlandish solution, I don't know, really, it's one that no one would ever possibly contemplate, is maybe they should have just stuck it out with Renault and honoured their agreement until the end of 2016 and had an 18-month window to negotiate with a future supplier, but that was untenable to them. And any predicament now really would be better than what they're currently in, where they're going to have no engine bolted to the back of their car, and they had to live with it for another 12 months, even though we've got to say they've been showing some signs of improvement in this back half of the campaign there, and now they're in a situation where who knows whether they're going to be present come Melbourne. Really, they just play their cards very irrationally, it must be said.
And I 100% agree with what you just said there about them sticking out until the end of their original agreement, which was 2016. And the reason I guess they didn't was the fact that they're just in their arrogance. Oh no, they don't want to be a customer to Renault, considering Renault's going to be the works team again. They didn't want to have that customer relationship with Renault. They don't want to have 2015 engines from Ferrari. Beggars can't be choosers, simple as that. And it is a bit,
especially considering it's a bit off topic with the whole scandal going on with Volkswagen there, but if they had been negotiating for a 2018 or 2019 collaboration with the Volkswagen group, and then to still expect this short-term agreement with Ferrari, be it 2 or 3 campaigns, and then expect full billing, that's really, what are Ferrari going to do? Oh yes, for our short-term deal, we're going to give you priority status over other teams who really have a long-term standing to us.
Yeah, well,
seriously arrogant.
Well, considering Haas as well, and now got quite a close working relationship with Ferrari. Sauber have for many years as well, and Red Bull coming back into the fray now after they had that one season, obviously with Ferrari back in 2006, was it?
Yeah, it was one season, and Adrian Newey infamously didn't agree with the Ferrari architecture of the engine there, and thus it was passed on to Toro Rosso, and Renault came on board, and we saw how rosy things were for them until 2013. Ever since, Red Bull haven't been the behemoth that they were over that 4 or 5 year period. Every criticism has been angled at the Viri outfit.
Exactly, but it's not all rosy either if Red Bull decide to quit, because they're contracted to Formula One and the commercial rights holder until 2020. They're the only team that's signed an agreement that long term with the sport and with Bernie Ecclestone. So,
and that was it? If I'm not wrong, back when they were enjoying their successes, there was no plan. Maybe we'll be beaten by a better organised outfit.
Was it last year or the year before? It was then sometime last year or the year before. Don't quote me on that. But yeah. So if they do decide to quit, Joe Sayward, he said that the Red Bull are going to have to pay a sum in excess of $500 million US dollars as an exit fee if they decide to quit. And we all hate exit fees when it comes to the mobile phone contracts and all that. But
add about 4 or 5 zeros to the end. For F1.
Yeah, but for Red Bull, to say that they're going to stay till 2020 and then want to quit, everyone says, oh, it's going to just impact the sport. We're going to lose 2 teams, but it's not going to be cheap for Red Bull to quit either. So why don't they just buckle up and embrace 2 or 3 seasons as a customer to Ferrari with 2015 engines? And they're not, that 500 million get saved, you know, and who knows, their revenue is probably going to be, even though that they're only got that customer engine, 2015 engine or whatever, their revenue is still going to be pretty good.
And I did point out to you as well, wouldn't say quiet in the sense of the word, but 2010, Renault, in name at least, they were still on the grid, and obviously they would have had some kind of priority status with their own power, and it was the first season that Red Bull did take out of their 4-year reign. That's customer in name, you could say. And if that's the case, and they next year, if they have a competitive chassis with the Ferrari power unit that's more than handy 2015 spec, then what's stopping them being competitive?
It just is very stupid, and it seems like the whole sport's been brought to a standstill as a result of this. But at the same time, how about we ask the question about whether this ongoing scenario has exposed greater flaws within Formula One itself?
Who would have thought that F1 is so infallible?
The unfair, it being unfair and whatnot. And someone in an article today that I read stated that why has the fate of one team been left to be decided by another team? Why doesn't the sport come in and decide for itself? Why doesn't whatever, Bernie or whoever have a contingency in case, something like this happens, have like a spare Cosworth engine or something sitting in the bank or whatever to come into play. Even then, probably Red Bull wouldn't use it because it wouldn't be as good as what they want it to be. But still, we heard as well yesterday that Sauber and Force India have made official complaints to the EU over, the disparity between price and the way that the sport is governed. So are we opening Pandora's box here? Could we, if this investigation does end up happening by the EU, can we see, something big happen? We don't know.
This has been in the pipeworks for a while. It went a bit quiet. Obviously, there's been other issues at the forefront, not least McLaren and Red Bull, but it's back in the contention now for this full-scale and how soon it does take place, whether it'll engulf the sport and bring it, as we do know, to an end. It's certainly not a bad thing if that is the case, and get rid of the rats in the rank, as it were. Of course, CVC, the owners there, and their vested interest is to suck all the money out at the detriment of the well-being of not just really the participants who are languishing at the expense of those with money and power, but the fans and everyone in the whole industry, I guess. It must be said, in the past, really, since the turn of the 21st century, it's been a bit of a slowly sinking ship, and they need to right it sooner than later.
Yeah, it's not even a sustainable business. Even if you say, it is a business, in that regard, it's not very sustainable. As we see, in relation to the Volkswagen Audi group, maybe it needs to wait till the dust settles, let all the bad blood be sort of expelled before they make a decision to enter F1. Perhaps, that's what F1 needs as well, expel the bad blood, wipe the slate clean, and, this model, of course, that and a strict governance, not, allow so many different parties to govern the sport, so many different people making rules. You need, a singular body.
There's also that other notion that for Didi Mateschitz, instead of continuing his operation, he would simply buy out Delta Topco and CVC and run the sport. Imagine if that came to pass.
Thank you. We know what kind of character.
Now he runs two teams and he thinks he runs the sport. Imagine if it was.
He doesn't even run the two teams. He's pretty much absent from most races, and sure, he doesn't talk a lot, which is okay. He doesn't attract a lot of media.
He's a notorious man with cape around his shoulders with his arms waving around. Yeah. He visits paddock every once in a blue moon.
Sort of thing. And a man like Dietrich Mateschitz, sure, he's a good businessman. He's very successful with Red Bull and what have you, the brand. But running F1, no thank you. With that sort of mindset that he has, about, we'll either do this or quits. What if, what if the day comes where he is running F1, something happens similar to this, and he's like, I'm just going to, close off Formula One. Formula One's dead, okay? Imagine that. We don't want someone like that in charge.
Yeah, you can't rule it out. Obviously, the majority would would agree wholeheartedly with your sentiments there. But stranger things have happened. If there's a good deal there for CVC, who have extracted already every dollar that they could possibly scrounge, then yeah, it can't be ruled out. And let's just hope this doesn't come to pass. We need someone with an ethically just moral sense of obligation to the sport, someone who's really been in it for the right reasons since they pretty much interested in the sport might have started, whenever that might be. Someone even like, yeah, you know, Ross Brawn, someone like that, if they could somehow have some kind of real oversight of the whole sport, someone who's going to act in the best interests.
But at the same time, as I said, you know, even bringing in someone like Ross Brawn, as much as it would be good, you need to expel all that bad blood first and make sure that, you know, we don't have these sort of rats crawling around as well. We need, clean slate for the sport to start and start over, and that would be good, you know, having a singular body in control. But let's move it on from the politics.
Yeah, it's very easy to have probably an entire week's worth of discussion.
Yeah, we can talk a lot about the politics, even though we're not, you know, we don't discuss them a lot, even in our writing. There is times where you want to get your thoughts across. But yeah, what we were talking about before, Ron Dennis, and pretty much confirming that he wants Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso for 2016.
It was very interesting the way that all did come to light with the Sky crew post Suzuka. It took a bit of prodding really to get that out of Ron, but as much as made really whether he's just saying this to appease, of course, the British fans who do want to see Jenson hang around a bit longer. But of course, it goes flying in the face of really the standoff between both party and employer in recent weeks. Really, there's nothing to suggest that Button really wants to hang around, at least not at Woking there. And same for Alonso in light of his outburst at Suzuka. Who knows if he will be there as well.
Yeah, well, Alonso famously is broken ever since the first tenure of McLaren. He's broken pretty much every contract he's had, so in spectacular style as well. So can we see, you know, this relationship perhaps, you know, going down the same route? We'll see. But yeah, Ron Dennis stood by that. Fernando Alonso has a 3-year deal with McLaren. Jenson Button has 2, even though we've heard whispers here and there that second year is an option that McLaren still need to take up.
Ron's come out now on Sunday and he did say, oh, maybe I should have told Jenson earlier that it was locked in for 2 years, just like he'd been toying with him. And then Jenson has no clue that this was even the case. And
it just seems like, you know,
two parties operating on a completely different wavelength.
Exactly. You know, we see it seems like there's no unity at all within the team. We see Honda operating separately. We see managers in McLaren, you know, apparently Eric Bollier and Jonathan Neal are not on speaking terms, blah, blah, blah.
Ron Dennis mentioned on Sunday as well, you thought that the latter there, Jonathan Neal, should be the one who is to move on.
Well, he seems,
interest of McLaren.
His statements seem to, you know, differ from what, you know, we saw Jenson Button on the Thursday during the press conference say that, you know, he's decided his future or whatever, and if he's going to stay in F1, it'll be with McLaren. And then on the Friday, Jonathan Neal comes out and says that, oh, you know, there's no point keeping a driver if he doesn't want to be in that seat. So get these conflicting, you know, it seems, yeah, it's bad enough that they're doing poor on track. It's even worse that, you know, the team is falling apart from the inside. Perhaps, you know, McLaren need as we said about F1 before, as the sport as a whole, perhaps it needs that solitary figure to whip everything back in line. Some did quite successfully when he was team principal, when he first started off as team principal back in the early 80s.
We did mention as well that Ron should return almost to his full autonomy, not that he hasn't already acquired much of that back when he had that coup that he staged rather Machiavellian-like against Martin Whitmarsh end of 2013, but to overthrow Neal. And then
but he didn't really, but Dennis didn't really, you know, take full control. Like he
still answerable to the board.
His presence is still there at most races, but he doesn't have that same presence that he used to, that he had up until Martin Whitmarsh did take over initially. And then it's very interesting that this is the situation at McLaren. It's not just they're doing poorly on track. Internally as well, there seems to be a lot of frustrations going on, and what we said, Button as well pointed out that the situation is not similar to the way it was in 2014. And he said that a decision will be made, or announcement will be made sooner than later about his future. So we'll just have to wait and see. But
keep us hanging till Christmas Eve again.
Again, December or something. We were waiting. I was on my well-earned holiday or whatever, and I was still waiting beside the my news feeds or whatever to get any word of McLaren's announcement for their drivers.
But I also heard Ronnie did say, rather off the cuff, that there's going to be a new commercial agreement announced during the week. Whether this comes to pass, of course, going way sponsor. Back, the title sponsor, which never came to be.
December the 1st or something. Yeah. It was going to be 2014, but yeah, new sponsor. Ron says TBA soon, so we'll see.
I.e. sometime this decade. We can
sometime this decade, yeah. But we discussed this a few weeks ago as well on the podcast about how the team are going to lose a lot of prize money this year, a lot of TV money as well because of their results. And, you know, sponsors are putting them under the pump as well. So imagine, you know, if they finished where they are in the constructors, if a few sponsors will decide to move on.
We already saw Boss gone to Mercedes.
Yeah, Boss left last year, but, you know, the car is already looking quite bare as it is. Are we going to see it down to the level of Mana Marussia next year where, you know, there's only one or two sponsors on the car?
Fall from grace from the Halcyon days, Marlboro West, Vodafone, they were littered in sponsors.
Back before Ferrari, you know, back before the Schumacher era, Ferrari, McLaren were really the team to be with. They had all the premium sponsors on board, you know, alcohol, tobacco, the watch companies, coffee, and Segafredo Zanetti as well. So everyone was on board with McLaren, but yeah, now it's
who can blame them? Really, the flawed the entire model that they operate on track and off. It's just it's not working in any shape, and they're really going to have almost a revolution now. And if that means that long-time servants there do have to move on to make facilitate that change, and so be it. Otherwise, the glory days, which everyone was accustomed to, they were always there or thereabouts, give or take 1 or 2 seasons. The last 30 years, really, they've been at the forefront, and ever since really Lewis Hamilton, as we're going to touch on shortly, his exit end of 2012 has coincided with their darkest chapter.
And not just, we'll discuss Lewis Hamilton's departure. There was another key figure there that left as well at the end of 2012, which we'll talk soon about. But yeah, driver announcements now. We are under the pump ourselves to get this under an hour done. But yeah, driver announcements as well. And Romain Grosjean, the first driver to be announced by the new Haas F1 team. And question, good or bad move?
Oh, I'm really quite enthused by it. I think it's a leap of faith, but if it does pay off, they have a half-decent car in collaboration with Ferrari, and it could lead to him taking up you'd assume almost certainly, Kimi Räikkönen hang up the helmet end of next season. He'd be first cab off the rank then if he really does put in a compelling job. And
Haas as well Gene Haas during the press conference did, when he was quizzed about why is his approach to F1 different, Haas did say that instead of being an independent constructor like all the other teams in the midfield, we want to, we are very much dependent on our suppliers. So the chassis being built by Dallara, who used to be in F1 as well quite a bit before that IndyCar, before becoming solely an IndyCar supplier. And then, of course, getting a lot of their, obviously the engine, but also a lot of components from Ferrari too. So it seems like they're going to come with had 2 years of lead time now. So a lot of development going into this project as well. And he's got the guy he wanted in an experienced driver, and there's one more experience than Romain Grosjean to join. And Haas himself said that he was rather surprised that someone of the caliber of Grosjean decided to, take interest in the team. So,
well, Grosjean did say he'd been watching from afar early as really the start of this season. He had obviously been a keen observer, and as it got closer to the date and hearing about how closely the collaboration is between Maranello and this operation, which is being run really satellite out of the US, he's jumped on board, and really great endorsement for a startup.
And the team principal, apparently, Gunther Steiner, he first approached Grosjean's management in Barcelona this year. So talks have been in place for quite a bit of time, but yeah, the question is now who is going to be the second driver.
Well, that's more interesting than Grosjean, who was almost certain going back about pre-Singapore there were strong vibes coming out
that it would be him. So names like Esteban Gutierrez, Alexander Rossi, Kevin Magnussen, even they've all been linked. But
who knows? It could be tied in with the Red Bull situation if there's
even
a
the Red
driver
even the Red Bull situation, if they decide to pull the plug, and they'll have 4 drivers out of a job next year. So someone like a Ricciardo or a Verstappen even could earn the call up to.
It'd be logical given the strong links between both of those drivers to a Ferrari berth in the future. And obviously, if they've got that collaboration there, then that could be seamless in a year's time to be alongside Grosjean, really in contention for that Ferrari seat.
Very much so. So that'll be, I guess, we predicted that it would be such a good silly season this year, but it really hasn't delivered. And this is probably the biggest sort of move we've seen so far. Everyone has stayed put where they are. Sergio Perez, before Japan, he signed a deal with Force India 16. So Force India, Williams, Ferrari, Sauber, well, they announced theirs a long time ago. They're, all these teams who we thought were going to see a lot of movement going on, they're staying the same for 2016. So it'll be interesting.
Not necessarily a bad thing for solidarity there to see that.
Not at all, but in terms of, we wanted to see guys probably move up the order that didn't move up the order, and it was really when Kimi Räikkönen re-signed with Ferrari. He was the kingpin, and after that we didn't really see that there would be a lot of movement. It was Haas that was the team that we thought, because they're that de facto Ferrari team, perhaps they will have 2 of the prize seats now. One of those seats is gone. Some of the big contenders in Hülkenberg, Perez, or whatever, they've already re-signed with their current team. So, yeah, it's going to be an outsider now. In a Magnussen or a Gutierrez will come in and take that seat, it seems.
Yeah, well, keeping their bets open, obviously, for waiting just for clarification on that future. What happens, of course, with McLaren too, whether there's a vacancy there, and Red Bull. So it's probably a smart move. Obviously, they could have gone and done the logical thing and just said, Esteban Gutierrez is our other driver, but no, they haven't locked it in.
Yeah, they're still waiting, as you said, for the Red Bull situation. But as you alluded to before, HRMC in Stone, their hearing has been put off until December 10 now. And you think that's more than enough time for Renault to finalise its deal with Lotus and perhaps get all the money in place to pay off those creditors.
Was a large reason really for Grosjean making that jump. He didn't want to have the uncertainty there. As a teammate lock, as it were, end of 2009 when Toyota pulled out, he was very strongly linked to a Renault, but they had their own separate issues going on then, and he ended up going with Virgin. Yeah. Of course, they signed up under that ill-fated cost cap agreement, and we saw how they've gone in the 6 subsequent seasons. But for Haas, with all of these close ties with Ferrari, I think Grosjean's not sure a bet.
Well, Haas, he was asked, where are you going to succeed where the other 3 teams failed, and he did put the onus on the fact that he's had more time to develop their car than HRT, Marussia, and then Team Lotus did. They sort of, when they entered F1 in 2010, they were still developing their car in the season.
Yeah, for Haas, there was a lot of talk they might have even made their debut this season, but they were very wise postponing that for another 12 months, and hopefully they'll get the fruits for that patience come March or April next season.
So there really is a lot of, excitement to see a new team come in and be competitive, because as we said, the last 3 teams that entered F1, they were just backmarkers. So having Haas come in, it'll be really exciting to see back to Lotus as well, and the money situation with HRMC. And it seems that a lot of the delay with Renault signing the deal with Lotus is the fact that CVC have been quite reluctant to give the historic team bonus to them.
Show me the money!
And I think you said the other day to me off air that it's not going to be paid as a lump sum, it'll be paid in installments.
Very small increments.
So how much was it? 18 million or something, you were saying?
Maybe even less.
Over a period of 4 years, and that way it means that Renault will sign on for the next 4 seasons, of course. But getting those small payments. So that's pretty stingy from CVC. It has to be said, you know,
Well,
considering
they are the blood-sucking, money-thinning launderers. So we do understand their sentiment there. It's not unexpected at all. They're not really in any kind of a desire to really help out a manufacturer team, as Renault will be, back in. You think it'd be in their remit.
Yeah, well, they already give the historic payments to other teams. You know, McLaren. I don't think McLaren gets it. Williams, Mercedes, and Ferrari. And Ferrari, of course, get that separate Ferrari payment as well. Yeah, they do. I'm just recalling this.
Side deal.
No, I'm just recalling this diagram, this very good diagram that Joe Saywood did a while ago, and I tried to memorize it all, and it was just so difficult because you see there's like one sum of money that is distributed, and then it's distributed into so many little segments that it's hard to keep up where all the money goes. And I did see that Ferrari have like a special payment that they get for being Ferrari to stay in the sport. So yeah, you know, that just shows you the inequality that, you know, the teams have here.
This would be something, as part we were discussing earlier, of course, if there's to be a revolution for F1, that needs to be erased, and all teams, just if they want to be there, so be it. And they
but then, you know, the teams will get all stingy and say, no, we're not going to compete unless we get our, you know, entitlements, you know.
Can't be right.
Yeah.
Where's the consistency?
But anyway, sticking with Renault, ART GPs, the successful GP2 team. They've got teams in a lot of different categories as well. Frederic Vasseur, he's tipped to be the new team principal. James Allen has discussed this, that perhaps, you know, with his strong French connections, being a very prominent figure in French motorsport, that he will be team principal of Renault.
He's extremely well credentialed from his lower category successes, not unlike really Eric Boulier, who came in a relative green thumb
to F1,
Renault 2010, and look how he's gone. He's at McLaren now.
It's really treating him well, isn't it, at McLaren?
Yeah,
but
he's regretting that now.
Cyril Abiteboul will stay on as, you know, engine head in Viry Chatillon. So
probably good for their solidarity to have someone who's experienced there,
to stay there. But there was, you know, perhaps, you know, the odd whisper that perhaps Abiteboul will come back as a team principal, as he was, you know, back with Caterham, but he'll be team principal of Renault. But that's not the case. It seems Vasseur might get that call, and still Alain Prost's name still being linked to being a in the same capacity that Niki Lauda is to Mercedes, perhaps, you know, non-executive chairman sort of thing.
Good to see him back in the paddock on more or less a full-time basis.
Yeah, talking a lot.
Drivers back there, along with all the old heads we do have. Of course, Prost and Lauda, and that Tyres 84. And
but it was detailed by James Allen that because of I don't think it was detailed by him, but a comment that I saw in the comments section on that piece, that because of Prost's heavy ties to Formula E now, obviously having his own name in Formula E, that running an F1 team full-time wouldn't be his, he couldn't balance it. So perhaps, you know, he'll stay on in that capacity that Lauda is there, and also run his Formula E team. But yeah, now that Vasseur is a strong, you know, contender for being the team principal for Renault, it was interesting to see after that he got interviewed and said that he was a strong advocate for Stoffel Vandoorne to be on the grid for next season. And obviously, if McLaren end up keeping their drivers, Vasseur says that it'll be a great injustice if we don't see Vandoorne elsewhere. And perhaps, you know, if Vasseur ends up as team principal of Renault, is it possible that he can bring Vandoorne along with him to Renault? Obviously, Pastor Maldonado is locked in there, so it's only one seat available. Could Vandoorne be the man?
Oh, it'd be great. Really, a similar notion to Kevin Magnussen. It'd be unjust if he wasn't restored to the grid next season. So for Vandoorne, who's set the world alight in GP2 over a couple of seasons now, he can't hang around forever. He's probably expecting some kind of upgrade next season, whether it would be like official reserve for McLaren. But the compelling thought of a race seat with a factory-backed manufacturer there, really too hard for him to pass. And if he's got that tie with Vasseur being under his tutelage really in the GP2, it's a logical progression.
Very much so. And we'll get straight to Nostalgia Straight now, I guess, because we are running close to the hour mark. But yeah, goes the clock. And yeah, thanks to you actually for pointing this out, because I had no idea about it. So I'll let you lead the way.
I across it myself. Yeah, just the other day, just read a headline. They were proclaiming how it was 3 years ago that Hamilton made that fortuitous, as it's now proven, jump from pretty much a team everyone had assumed since he made that debut that he'd be at McLaren for life. And ever since his 2008 title, his successes on track at least only went backwards, and it's culminated the infamous Singapore Grand Prix 2012. He's looking around at the stricken Mercedes McLaren there, and that was the moment many have acknowledged that he decided take a leap of faith, move to Mercedes, who had really been slowly edging up to the front, but no one could have possibly envisaged the kind of successes they've enjoyed in subsequent seasons. It took him a year, of course, with the end of the old regulation, the V8 era, but clearly Hamilton, he must have known something. He had good advice from Ross Brawn and Niki Lauda, who wooed him extremely heavily, and as a result, he took Michael Schumacher's place, and a lot of people were bit polarized about this as well. And personally, I got to say, I wasn't amused there, because I was hoping to see the great man there enjoy some of the fruits of his perseverance over 3 seasons. And a lot of people thought really it was career suicide for Hamilton, along the same vein as Jacques Villeneuve, and how he's proved everyone wrong. What were your thoughts anyway?
Yeah, of course, it was a bit unjust for Schumacher to have here. I mean, with another season, perhaps we could have seen a few more results, considering how unlucky 2012 was on many occasions. But yeah, and it felt a bit unjust for Schumacher, of course. But it was the beginning of the end for McLaren, it seems, as well. The fact that Hamilton went, and then they quickly appointed Sergio Perez. I mean, Perez had shown that he was a capable driver that season, but it felt like it was done a bit too hastily, the call-up of Perez. And then, of course, Hamilton off to Mercedes for the next season to partner with his then good buddy Nico Rosberg. And it was surprising. Personally, my biggest surprise was that Hamilton, considering his character and everything, that he opted for a long-term project. And there was rumination at the time that Brackley's intentions were solely on 2014 and the new regulations. Ross Brawn, have to give so much credit to that guy, which a lot of people don't do these days. I mean, I got criticised in an article I wrote after Mercedes won the Constructors' Championship last year that Ross Brawn is to credit for some of their success. And they said, he's not there, so he doesn't deserve success. But I said, how did he get names like Toto Wolff, Paddy Lowe, the man from McLaren?
Niki Lauda.
Yeah, Paddy Lowe, the man from McLaren as well, left along with Lewis Hamilton, signalling the beginning of the end there. And, getting all those key technical and managerial people in place. It was Ross Brawn who did that. A man with his influence was able to do it. And
he was the architect, and it's a great injustice he didn't get to hang around at least for that first campaign, and probably would have been a really ideal timing for him to say end of 2014. What a way to sign off for the second time as it's now been, and we haven't really seen him near the paddock since then. And really, he did a lot. Early days, he copped a lot of flack, some of the decisions he made, and he's been vindicated time and time again, really, the past 2 seasons.
Well, it just goes to show in stark contrast with, say, Red Bull Racing, for example, that someone like a great thinker like Ross Brawn, he was able to, along with his people, were able to think long term. They said, we can't be Red Bull or Ferrari with the current regulations, so let's plan ahead. The couple of victories that they picked up in 2012 and 2013, the pole positions that they achieved as well, we're not going to go towards we're not going to go towards a championship mount. It was just some recompense for the work that they were doing, but their goal was 2014. And look, they came out in 2014 all guns blazing, and Drivers' Championship clinched, Constructors' Championship clinched. The effects are carrying on over to 2015. Constructors' Championship is pretty much good as gold, whereas the Drivers' Championship is still up in the air, but it is a good chance that that's going to happen. And, look, you pointed out as well that 20 victories for Lewis Hamilton. joined Mercedes.
Well, he's nearly matched the 21 he enjoyed with McLaren in his 6 years in not even 3 campaigns at Brackley. So
two and a half years with Mercedes. He's achieved almost as many victories there, and compared to Nico Rosberg, victories that he's achieved since Lewis Hamilton joined the team. So, yeah, Hamilton and Mercedes, it's really it's something that has been quite.
It's been a blessed collaboration.
Blessed collaboration, exactly. Hashtag blessed. And at the same time, a lot of people, as you said, were polarized over the fact that Hamilton made the decision to go to Mercedes. Same with Sebastian Vettel, I guess you could say, last year, leaving Red Bull, the team that pretty much raised him to where he was. And, he's like, yeah, guys, I'm off to Ferrari now. And we're seeing that, he's slowly enjoying Ferrari, and perhaps next year we'll see Hamilton versus Vettel, Mercedes versus Ferrari for the championship.
Be a sight for sore eyes. For one reason or another, either hasn't really enjoyed the full package. It has eluded us really for quite a while now. To see them both at the forefront with really the best on offer, that'd be something. Of course, it'd be great to see Alonso up there if McLaren's car ever does come to fruition, or whether he moves on or out of the sport. But
you want to see these manufacturer teams up there. They've got all the backing, the money, the support, and ultimately you want to see them up there, and you want to see some more manufacturers come into the sport. If Red Bull's salvation is the Volkswagen Audi group, then, we want to see it. And, better times lie ahead for the sport, and if that is the case. So,
well, it can only get better from here, and that's saying something.
That is, and that's pretty much it with
Monster Edition, it must be said.
Monster Edition, makes up for the non-event of Saturday, it has to be said. But, good to have Bayden back as well, and we look forward to seeing you next week then.
Yes, much to discuss there, of course. Bathurst will be right around the corner in 7 days' time.
Very much so, and we'll see you then. Thank you for joining us.